Great. Sam, I think we get to the final leg of the show, but let me ask you, what are your expectations coming from tomorrow's debate?
A very vibrant, I mean, we use that word again, a very vibrant exchange of views, and we certainly do not expect the panel to have the final say. We don't expect them to have the first say or the final say. We want the people, the audience, to be steering that debate. And I personally expect phenomenal fun, but I also expect, as a non-African, to learn a lot as well from what's going to be said tomorrow.
So who is coming and from where?
Right, good question. Who's coming and from where? Well, we'll start with the panel. On the panel, we've got Dr. George Aite. He's a Ghanaian academic, author, economist. He's based in Washington, D.C., but he's currently right here in Accra. We've got a renowned South African economist and political analyst. His name is Kuseni Dlamini. He's flown in from Johannesburg and is with us. We've got a Uganda opposition activist. She's a civil activist, and her name is Anne Mugisha. She's going to be with us on the panel as well. And one of your other academics here, who's Professor Dr. Michael White-Pesa, who is at the University of Ghana, I believe. He's a research fellow at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. So that's our panel of 4. And then as for everyone else, anyone, teachers, students, policemen, businessmen and women, you name it. And talking of students, I've had the opportunity to go to 3 universities, spoken to some lecturers, but spoken to the students as well. And the level of engagement, the passion, the articulation of ideas, it is just impressive. Yes, some of them are zealous, and some would say that perhaps the zeal is slightly misguided. That is not for me to decide. However, I cannot escape is the passion and the level of articulation of ideas. So anyone from anywhere who can speak is invited, and as long as they get one of these, by the way, I hope it's okay for me to show this to the camera, yeah? I know which camera we're using, this one.
It's strictly by invitation.
It's strictly by invitation, and that's because I'll give you this one. I know you've already got yours.
All right, so if the camera can pick it,
yeah, and
that's a BBC Africa debate.
Exactly.
And you need one of these to enter the hall tomorrow.
Precisely, and we'll leave some behind for your viewers, so you could give a few away, and they've got to get that. There's a number at the back that they can text or call and say they'll be coming, so their name will be added to the list. It just helps to keep a sense of order, and then they can join the 100 or 150 people who will be making their views heard to over 166 million people around the world on Friday.
Let me return to you, Sam, for good reason, and find out from you, based on all the experience you've gathered, to ask you, if an African Spring were to occur, and since you say it's a very diverse continent, in which places would you expect to see this happen?
You're asking me a very difficult question that no BBC journalist should ever attempt to answer. Do you want the honest answer?
Yes.
It is impossible to predict. If a year ago, a little over a year ago, no one would have guessed what was going to happen in the Arab world. It's impossible to predict. Is an African Spring going to happen? Nobody knows. If it is going to happen, and it's up to Africans to decide whether it happens or not and where. There is no way to know.
Very intelligent answer, I'll say, a very evasive one at the same time. But Stefan, must the African Spring, if it occurs, be in the nature of the Arab Spring? Can it come in another guise?
Well, as we said at the beginning of our conversation, it did come in another guise in the early 90s. There was removal of single-party states, multi-party politics erupted, freedom of the media. So no one is saying that Africa south of the Sahara should follow anyone else's view of things, you know, how they should implement reform. Is it incremental in some parts of the continent? Is it more brusque in other parts? It is for Africa to decide for themselves.
It's for Africa to decide for themselves. Tom from Tema sends a text message and says that despite the disappointments from the Arab Spring so far, why is the West still pushing deeper into other areas like Syria and Iran? Anybody wants to attempt an answer?
Stefan, I think this is one for you.
I'm not sure whether I'm pushing anywhere. You know, what I would like to say is I'd like to address one thing that has come up in conversations already, which is why is the BBC even talking about the African Spring? And to be fair, it would be overstating the influence of the BBC to say so, whereby the words African Spring, as you know, have been living on social media platforms for months in Ghana, in Nigeria, in the diaspora, everywhere. This is something that we are reporting about, not leading.
I get the sense of the question, and I think that it's not so much directed at the BBC. I think that this is a question that seems to suggest that there's a foreign hand pushing the whole agenda as far as Arab Spring is concerned. And for him, that foreign hand, which he calls the West, despite what he considers a failure in achieving the certain result, that hand is still now going beyond the Arab world, I mean the North African world, into Syria and Iran. And for what purpose? That seems to be Tom's concern. He thinks that a certain superpower or some superpowers out there.
Shall remain unnamed.
That shall remain unnamed with the initials of USA. But let's address this very point. I mean, I've heard this point. We've all heard this point over the last 12 months.
That's right.
Foreign intervention, foreign superpower. But this is exactly what the fallen leaders have been saying all along, that this is a foreign conspiracy, that this is a Western, and this was their last line of defense against what they saw was inevitable. Today, in today's news, the Arab League has passed the responsibility and asked the Security Council of the United Nations to adopt its resolution on Syria. It is the Arab League that has, so it is not as some people would, I mean, obviously, there are interests. You know, the West has interests in Syria, and they want to see a certain change or not.
Right.
I don't know about that, but all I'm saying is, I've heard this before many, many times, and some parts of another party to the argument would say, well, we welcome this support if it helps us towards freedom.
You welcome it if it helps you towards freedom, and then yet again another very cautious response, and that's to be expected. But Alex, there's a very interesting text message here. It has only 3 words.
Let's hear it.
It says, "Thank you, BBC." That's all the person says, and I'm sure quite impressed and happy about what is happening. Was Arab Spring necessary in the first place?
That's a very interesting question, but a question whose answer, I guess, only the people in the Arab region can really answer. Because you see, they are the ones who began the events that we have today come to call the Arab Spring. And it carried momentum Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and swept right across. And they alone would really know if it was the only option they had to achieve whatever they wanted to achieve. Only they would be able to articulate, and even amongst themselves, some of them would not be able to answer that question in the affirmative and say, yes, it was necessary. Others would say, without a doubt, it was necessary. But I guess this is the beauty of it all, because you see, we all yearn to be heard. We all yearn to be understood. And because we are all different, we won't all say the same thing. The ability to be able to say what you want to say, Ni, and then I say what I want to say, and afterwards we shake hands and go home, in a way, was the expression that was being seen on the streets of Tunis, Cairo, and all the way to Damascus. So this is a question that only they can answer, and some would interpret what has happened on the street as their answer. That's not for me to decide, I'm afraid.
That's not for you to decide, you're afraid. I'll take final comments from each of you. I'll begin with you, Stefan. What will be your concluding remarks on the topic we've been discussing so far?
Well, I think obviously look forward to tomorrow's BBC Africa debate on reform. But I look forward to a forum where African voices are being heard right across the continent and right across the world to be able to tackle, all issues that matter to the continent. So it's a process for us as well. As Sam said, we are going to learn a lot tomorrow, and in February in Sierra Leone, and in March in Malawi.
What will be your final remarks, Sam?
Mine. On my program, I asked this one guest, one young man, this very question. I said, was it worth it? And he said, it is worth it. It was worth it. And I said, why? And he said, because I'm not afraid anymore. That's it. This fear that was in his heart, these are his words. He said, I am not afraid anymore. And for him, and for countless of young people risking their lives, it seems to be very much worth it.
Seems to be very much worth it. Alex, you get a final word on this one.
Well, thank you. And my final words would be, well, obviously, would be selfish. At 1900 GMT, if you can, do tune in and listen to the debate. But while you listen, do not just be a consumer. The hope is that you are inspired, not so much to visible action as it is to intellectual action. That you must realize that there is a lot going on around you, not just beyond your doorstep, your capital, your region, your country, your continent, and your world. And to act as though there is nothing outside your doorstep is to do yourself an injustice. Africa Debate gives you a chance to engage on issues of a pan-African nature. Seize it.
There was so much hype given to this by the international media that probably that's the reason it caught on. Should we be blaming them?
Partially. And we need to be very, very clear about the kind of society we're dealing with. We're talking about the Arabs.
Right.
Anybody who has the least insight about the sociology, the psychology of the Arab, I'm talking about the Arab in generic and global terms, will know that what happened was really going to happen.
Okay.
But it was a matter of time. It needed just a spark. If you read some of the classical great Arab writers, Khattab Yassin, Tunisian, a book that he wrote, Nejma.
Okay.
It's about the religion, Islam,
Okay.
and how Islam kicks in the teeth of civil liberties, especially those of women. There's another Moroccan writer, Boujedra, who wrote La Répudiation. Now, the Nejma I mentioned is the name of a heroine in the novel,
Okay.
who was just thrown away because Islamic laws do not recognize the rights of a woman, or so on.
Okay.
And this is so endemic and entrenched that Boujedra focused on the divorce system in the Arab world. La répudiation, which means repudiation, you can just mention, I repudiate you, I reject you a number of times.
Is it a talak thing?
And the marriage.
Talak.
Exactly.
3 times and I've divorced you.
Thank you. And the marriage is over. It goes deeper than just that. And if you look, also mix this together with, for example, no, Egypt was colonized by Great Britain. I mean, just like that. Yeah. But if you look at Tunisia, French influence, barbaric colonial policy mixing with this, brutality. Go to Togo and you see the mindset of the gendarme. Right. I'm talking about certain factors that made, a refusal to respect the rights of these individuals in Morocco, in Tunisia, and the abject poverty that society also nurtured. The young man whose fruit cart was seized, he felt his back was to the wall. What did he have to wait for again to say, no, this is not the world I belong to. I will go. He bent himself. Yeah. And that is another history. So, you see, yes, Western media, yes, the media also poured a lot of, I would say, incendiary material on what had already started. Okay. But it was like, yes, we have all waited for this to happen. And it should go to its logical conclusion. If you've been to Egypt before, okay. I was at the, 4 years ago, there was the AU summit at Sharm el-Sheikh. Right. I'm telling you, just to change money in Cairo, policemen were hovering around you, legitimate money with your visa and passport. That is the corrupt, brutal state, police state. And if you don't live it at first hand, you will never know what it